Hey guys, I'm Josh, and this week I'm just joshing around with reconditioning this toy box. This toy box was actually built by my grandfather like 60 some odd years ago. He built it for my aunt and my mom to store their toys. But it's actually been sitting in a bedroom on their second floor for like the past 40 years, where it's been used to store linens and blankets and things. Just looking at it, there's nothing particularly fancy or flashy about its design or architecture. I mean, its construction is just basically plywood. But it's sturdy and it's modest, just like the guy who built it. And I was fortunate enough to inherit it. So I figured I'd go ahead and make some modifications of my own so it could suit our needs. And the first thing I'm doing is cutting out this board on the bottom so that I can install a drawer. This thing is humongous, because when you open the lid up, it's got like a 2-foot drop to the bottom, so there's plenty of room to add some versatility. For this board that I'm cutting out, I actually really had to be precise with my cuts, because I didn't want any jagged edges or gaps or anything, because I'm actually going to use this board as the front of the drawer. What I'm doing right now is marking, measuring, and cutting 2x4s that I'm going to be using as supports for the slides of the drawer. Nothing too special here, just cutting the 2x4s to size and installing them in the sides with the screws. Above the drawer, in the top portion, that's going to be a storage area as well, so right now I'm just cutting some supports for that shelf bottom. And I'm smoothing out all the edges and sides using this spiffy new sander that my parents bought for me. For the shelf bottom, as well as the construction of the drawer and anything else that I'm doing to modify this thing, I'm using 1/2-inch plywood. And since this piece of plywood's just a little bit too big to be sliding across the table saw, I am clamping a guide down in place and then just using the circular saw. After it's all cut down to size and sanded over nice and smooth, I slide it into place and got a nice tight fit. What I'm doing here is applying wood filler all over the box to any nicks or scratches or blemishes that I find, as well as to all the edges of the plywood. This will give it a nice smooth finish when it comes time to paint. At one point, I actually thought about trying to refinish this box using some sort of Danish oil or some sort of stain, but I decided against it because there's quite a few little nicks and scratches and blemishes on the thing. And I don't think I'm quite at that skill level required to do a good job with that. And right now, I'm trying to recreate the Dust Bowl from the 1930s using my palm sander. Seriously, this wood filler makes a ton of dust. And right now I am installing gas struts to the lid. And I'm hoping that this will alleviate the possibility of any pinched fingers. But we'll see. Overall, these things do a decent job of softening the opening and closing of the lid, but I might have to upgrade them at some point in the future. Now here you can see me applying the first of many coats of paint. I used a simple white paint and primer in one with an eggshell finish. Ordinarily, I wouldn't use a roller to paint a piece of furniture, but this thing has a lot of surface area to cover. Right here, I'm measuring out the dimensions I'm going to need when I start building the drawer. I set up the table saw to rip the boards into the size I need. You might think I'm crazy for passing my camera right over a spinning saw blade, but now that the sideboards are all ripped to size, I'm going to chop them down to the right length. And I started out doing that by using my chop saw, but I switched over to the circular saw because I had to flip the board over after it cut almost the whole way through, and that was causing an uneven cut. So I ended up having better results just using the circular saw. I'm once again sanding all the sides and edges nice and smooth on these boards using my fancy new sander. Thanks again, Mom and Dad. I just wanted to break in here for a second and explain what I'm doing. I'm actually routing out the drawer for the toy box, but I didn't really have a way of doing it in one long continuous strip, so I rigged up this little doodad on the bottom of the router. It's just a guide that's going to sit over the edge of the bottom of the drawer boards, and then it'll allow the router to slide in a consistent cutting pattern. So, there you go. I was a little worried about how this would turn out, but this really did a nice job. Nice and consistent on the groove. And I really have to say something again about these router bits that I bought. I got them on Amazon, and I cannot be happier with them. They're a fraction of the price that you would pay for something at Lowe's or Home Depot, but they work so well. Now, to assemble the drawer, I am clamping it into place using this corner clamp that my father-in-law gave me, and I'm using these deck screws to hold it together. I had planned on using some glue and some brad nails, but these deck screws actually did a really nice job of keeping it nice and secure. These are the dimensions of the inside of the drawer. It's not perfectly square, but it's close enough and no one's really going to notice. Here I'm just marking out the measurements that I had gotten from the figures that I showed a second ago. I know that not every piece of detail shows on camera, but I had to remeasure this a couple different times and remark it because I didn't want to have to redo this piece. I wanted to measure, mark, and get everything perfectly lined up so that when I cut, it was the right size. Either I'm getting better at this crap, or I really lucked out, because this thing fit perfectly. This was actually the first time that I've ever mounted drawer slides. Like ever. But thankfully, the instructions were pretty decent. For the slides that mount inside the box itself, I had to put the drawer in place and get the measurements I needed. I decided to get the soft close slides again in an effort to alleviate any pinched fingers. Ah, crap. Here's the current state of the box. I put 3 coats of white paint on it, and then last night I put 1 coat of polyacrylic. And after I did that, some of the old varnish managed to bleed through, and I don't know why. So, I'm going to be repainting this, but I'm going to use a light green, and this will make it match the room that it's going to go into, which is our family room. So, here we go. This light green paint, again, is a paint and primer in one, so it covers really nicely. I debated about adding a finish to this box after I painted it, but I ultimately decided against it because I didn't want to have to repaint it again. And here is the finished product. It looks like an ordinary box because it is an ordinary box, but it stores a lot of toys inside of it, so I'm really happy about that. Seriously, this thing eliminated several toy racks that we were using previously. So it's back to being used for what it was originally built for. Well, there you go. I'm pretty happy with how this toy box turned out. I know this wasn't a super exciting project this week, but it's something I wanted to do, and it really shows that you can take something old and make it new again. And it's also something that's very functional for us because it helped really clean up our family room. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'm Josh from Just Joshin' Around, and I'll see you next week.